I come from a storytelling tribe, which it's a family that tells stories, and we think it's charming. And that's part of how we test prospective spouses for our younger members, is we subject them to the endless storytelling. And my kids finally got to the point where they say, "Mom, it's okay if you stop telling that story." And I don't listen to them. Now, not everybody in the family loves this, but most of us do. And among my cousins, who are all about my age, we mostly like to remember my dad and my Uncle Clay, who married sisters, my mom and her sister. And they had what can only be described as a misspent youth. And man, the stories are great. They weren't so great when they were dragged home by the ear by the Santa Clara chief of police and dropped at their parents' door, but boy, we like to tell those stories now. And of course, my generation, we like to tell our stories of when we get together as a family, and our children who are, getting married and having children, they like to tell stories. The 5-year-olds, not so much. But family stories are important. Good ones, bad ones. Our origin stories are not just the story of how we get here or why someone is the way they are, or even here's how to learn from my mistakes. That's not the only reason we tell old stories, origin stories, stories like the stories in the Bible of our faith family. These are stories about our roots. It may not be obvious when you hear the story, but having these stories and the stories themselves are about our roots. And roots are not just something that is an interesting historical thing. Think about it. Roots are what feed the tree. Roots are what feed the tree. The tree is only as good as its roots, and the branches are only as good as the roots. And the foliage and the fruit only as good as the roots. So today I want to continue from what we did last week and share with you an origin story from Exodus 20. And it starts like this. And then God spoke all these words. Now, this is the long version of the 10 Commandments. There's a shorter version a little before this, and it starts, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery in Egypt, out of the house of slavery." And right there, most of us tune that out because we think this is the story about what happened to them way back when. Out of the house of slavery. And then we just go, yeah, thanks, Pastor, heard this. But we remember this and its depth and how that root story feeds us every time we have communion. Every time I stand behind this table and we talk together through the ritual, we say that God has brought us out of slavery to sin and death. Because there are more kinds of death than what put you 6 feet under. You can be a slave to all kinds of things. And I know you probably have some things in your head that you would really like to erase, and they won't go away. We're slave to that. And our captivity, by and large, our captivity, our spiritual captivity, our slavery to sin and death, mostly comes from our willfulness. Sometimes we are affected by the greed and cruelty of others. There is a whole assortment of ways that humans fail to emulate the God of Hesed. "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." You can get yourself all worked up about any of the commandments you want, but that's the real sticking point, isn't it? What else is your God? Your health? Your resentments? We have all kinds of things that stand between us and God. They're at the front of the line. Every day we struggle with that, if we're honest, and that's why we're here week after week after week, because we need a weekly reminder. whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above or is on the earth beneath and is in the water under the earth, you shall not bow down to them and serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, but showing Hesed, steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me. And we talked about this just last week. You can listen in last week and get caught up with the story by going to ffumc.net, and there's a pull-down menu for sermons. That'll be a good place to get caught up. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God. We traditionally hear this as you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. This is not about swearing. Swear all you want. Has nothing to do with this. Or swear all that is appropriate for your workplace. It has nothing to do with this. And there's another whole sermon about that, but the short version is we are made in the image of God, so we bear God in us. We bear the name of God, and we are obligated by that to live in godly ways. And when we do not bear the name of God in a godly way, then we have taken the Lord's name in vain. We have taken on our faith in vain. We have taken our religion in vain. This is shorthand for when you turn religion into evil, you have taken the Lord's name in vain. Nothing to do with, maybe I don't need to preach another sermon on that. That's good enough. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Thank you for being here. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or daughter, or your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your town. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that's in them, but even God rested on the 7th day. Interestingly, God makes humans on the 6th day, so the first thing we get to do is rest. And we're going to need the rest. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Okay, all of those commandments are about our relationship with God. And now we move into the commandments that are about our relationships with others. Honor your father and mother so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Call your mother. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Some of these people on Facebook are going to be in trouble. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. I will make one exception. I will covet your nice car. But we all have a little failing. Then, and this is where we're going today, in Numbers 14, we hear this as part of what's going on in this story. And Moses is having a conversation with God, which Moses spends the whole first 5 books of the Bible having a conversation with God, mostly a contentious conversation, where first he listens, and then he complains, and then he listens again, and then he complains, and then he does it anyway. And he was 80, so he should have known better. And now, therefore, says Moses, let the power of the Lord be great in the way that you promised when you spoke, saying, the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. What's going on here that Moses needs to say this? Well, what's going on here is that Moses is really, really upset. I mean, the people are always upset, and they're always complaining, and Moses always goes to God and says, what are you doing? Help me with these stiff-necked people. But this time it's Moses being the stiff-necked guy, because God just told him, I'm not coming with you to the promised land. And the lesson in here for us is that God is not good only when God does what we want. God is not good only when God does what we want. C.S. Lewis, who is most famous for the Narnia stories, was more often a theologian. His Narnia novels were really kind of a side hustle for him. And in his book, The Great Divorce, which has nothing to do with marriage and everything to do with God, he offers this explanation of what is this sin that makes it so hard for us to live into the Ten Commandments, the covenant we have with God. There are only two kinds of people in the end, he says. Those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says, "Thy will be done." Lewis goes on and says, all who are in hell choose it. Without free will, without self-choice, there would be no hell, which is a little harsh. But it's also Hesed. This is also loving kindness. This is also steadfast love and mercy. And God is so great that God submits God's own strength and justice and right to criticize and condemn to God's kindness. Even God subjects God's own will to Hesed. And Moses understands this when in Numbers, in a conversation about these willful, stubborn people, and in his disappointment about God saying, "I am not coming with you to the promised land." Turns out Moses doesn't get there either. He gets to see it, but he doesn't get to cross over into it. Moses finally says, "It will be as you have said." Because Moses has reminded God and therefore reminded himself. You know how when you remind somebody of something, it sticks with you too? You know, if you don't want to forget something, you ask someone else to remind you about it, and then you'll never forget it. And he proceeds to remind God that God is abounding in Hesed. He concludes by begging for forgiveness that the people don't deserve, in keeping with the greatness of your Hesed, your loving kindness. For a couple of weeks, I've been sharing with you my favorite quote from this book called Hesed, the inexpressible word and the mystery of God's loving kindness. Michael Card's lovely phrasing, this is how he describes Hesed. I just really like this. When the person, God in this case, from whom I have no right to expect anything, gives me everything, that is mercy. That is loving kindness. That is steadfast faithfulness. That is Hesed. Just after his revelation on the mountaintop, Moses is asked for something he knew he did not deserve. He asked God to change his mind and accompany the people through the wilderness to the promised land. And God said, "Okay, I'll come with you through the wilderness. But you'll have to go into the promised land on your own." And if ever the Lord will ultimately demonstrate by actions that God is indeed slow to anger, now is the time. And that's the appeal. Moses doesn't try to appeal to God's good nature by saying, "But we deserve it. But you promised us, you can't leave us now." He said, "Look, we don't deserve any of this. But you are the God of Hesed, steadfast love." The gift of the land to which they are traveling is a gift in and of itself. Maybe not so much for the people who are already there. And the liberated Hebrew slaves deserve none of this. They haven't achieved any of this on their own. And now they're fussed and they're whining, but Moses' plea is based on the knowledge he has of the character of God that has been revealed to him. The nation will be preserved through its long wilderness journey. The nation will be preserved by multiple generations. The nation will be preserved as it moves into the promised land because of the richness of God's Hesed. Not because it's inevitable, Not because it's a plan and a plan is always going to work. Not because of anything they've done to deserve it. Not because of worthiness. Simply because they are beloved. That's the equation. You're loved. And because you're loved, God loves you. And because God loves you, you're loved. That's the whole equation. That's all. That's all. What you deserve is over here someplace. What somebody else is deserving is over here someplace. But in this circle of God's love and you are your choices. It's difficult for us to understand how a being who is infinite in power submerses that power in pure kindness, pure, steadfast love, Hesed. We are naturally more able to understand the concept of commandments. Do this or suffer the consequences. But there is Hesed in these commandments as well, as C.S. Lewis said. You choose. You choose the path of God. You choose the not path of God. There's an invitation in these commandments. There's no threat of punishment. Even in the Garden of Eden, God does not curse the woman or the man. God curses the earth, but there's no condemning, just an invitation to richness and joy. It's not about do this or there'll be punishment. The natural consequences of free will are not punishment. They are the natural consequences of free will. And when we make it about obedience to laws, when we decide that our religion is a religion of forcing people to behave the way we've decided God thinks they should behave, we are way out of line. We're usually wrong too, but we're way out of line. And when we are ready to enforce our idea of God's commandments to us with violence and cruelty, we stray far from the path of God. Religion can become violent, and when it does, it has left God's presence. And we've seen this historically. Christians are famous for the Inquisition and the Crusades. Countless other religions have historical acts based in the name of their religion that are nothing more than violence. They have no relationship to actual religion because there's no Hesed. No Hesed, you are not on the path. We see it in our own day with radical Islam that oppresses and even murders women, and in Christian sects that are doing by and large the same thing. Commandments play an indispensable role in Christian life. They are a lamp unto our feet. They're not a scold. They're not a set of rules by which you... I had to listen to a theologian once say, why is it we think the most narrow, rigid interpretation of the Bible is the truest one? There's nothing in the Bible to suggest that. The hoop to jump through is not only not small, it's not even there. The commandments and these conversations that God is having in our origin story with Moses guide us in our journey before God and in our life with our neighbors. The commandments are about how to be in relationship with God and how to be in godly relationship with your neighbors. They don't show us what we have to do in order to get grace. They don't show us what we must do in order to receive God's covenantal mercy. We already have that. They light our way and show us the walk into joy. They show us how to walk into richness, to walk into delight, to walk into satisfaction, to walk into meaning. We have already been freely given God's grace, full of mercy and joy. So the question we have before us is not who's going to hell. It's how do we practice Hesed? We do it by reflecting the image of the God who is slow to anger. And I'm going to have to remember this tomorrow morning when I get on the freeway for my daily commute to go pick up my 2-year-old and bring him to preschool. Because there is nothing like a bad driver for me to invoke the name and anger of God upon them. I'm just telling you, that's one of the things that I notice every single day. It's probably not my worst failing, but it's certainly not an image of God. C.S. Lewis reminds us, those who ignore this divine teaching do so at their own peril, not because God is standing over them with a hammer, but because the teachings describe a way of living that is rewarding, peaceful, calm, serene, joyful. And to wander away from the path of God is to wander into the path of death. Slavery to sin and death, we say, where God's faithfulness and Hesed can't get to us. The commandments come as a gift from God. You may have noticed that the story always talks about 2 tablets. 2 tablets. Tablet 1, the way we attend to our life with God. Tablet 2, the way we attend to our life with our neighbor, which is interchangeable. Worship involves how we behave with our neighbor. These origin stories are our roots. They feed us from the ground up and they light our way. They show us how to live as a people who have already been freely given grace and mercy through Jesus Christ. I'd like to close with a meditation from one of my favorite poets, retired Methodist pastor, it's just a coincidence. His name is Steve Garnis Holmes, and you are welcome to close your eyes. You don't have to. Take a breath, put your hands in your lap, and just hear this as a prayer for you. This is called Return, and he quotes a passage from Joel 2. Return to the wholeness, the one your God, who is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in Hesed, and relenting from punishment. There is no journey to God. You are there. There is no goal of repentance you must reach for. It is within you. Give up your striving. Return to the truth of who you are. Give up the spiritual trek. Find your home here in the trust in the grace of God. Let go of your unhealthy affair with a God who judges you and needs to be pleased. Stay here with the one who already loves you, who is already and eternally delighted with you. Don't go off on a journey. Go in. Return to the peace at the center. There's a lot to let go of, but nowhere to go. Broken though you may be, you are in God. And that is enough. Be there.